Hello, my name's Clive Gidney from clivegidneyphotography.com, Photography Made Simple, and today I'm going to be showing you how I would process an image into black and white using Nik Effects. And the image I'm going to be using is one taken by a guy I know called Steven, who posted this image on Facebook, and I offered to show how I would process it in Nik Effects. So let's jump straight in. So this is the image straight out of the camera. So there's a couple of things I would do first. The color balance just looks slightly off to me. So let's just hit auto and see what that does. Now that makes it a little bit too cold. So let's just bring the color back a little bit to about there. The other thing I'm going to do before we go into open it in Photoshop, I'm just going to bring the shadows up a little bit. There. So now let's open this into Photoshop, and I take it into Photoshop rather than going into Nik Effects straight from Lightroom, because in Photoshop we can edit it as a smart object, which gives you the opportunity to go back and re-edit your settings. So here we are in Photoshop, and the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to change the crop on the picture, because the vicar guy is really quite central, and I want to give him a bit more space on the right to look into. So let's go into the crop tool, and I'm going to crop it to the 3:2 ratio. It was originally 4:3 because this was shot on a Panasonic Micro Four Thirds. So let's just bring that in a little bit tighter at the top there, like that, and shift him over there, which does two things. It gives a bit more space on the right, but it also gets rid of that highlight in the top left-hand corner, which would attract the eye. Now, Photoshop has a content-aware option, and it will fill this white space. If we tick this here, content-aware, it'll fill this white space. Just make that a little bit smaller there. Fill this white space with sampling from the background immediately by there. So let's just tick that, and Photoshop will do its thing, and it usually does a pretty good job on this, but sometimes the results are a bit unpredictable, so we'll see how it goes on this occasion. There we go, and you can see it's filled in the space, and it's filled it in really nicely so that that looks as though it was already there. So there's our crop. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do the Nik Effects as smart filters, which means that you can come back and alter them again at a subsequent later date if you want to. So the first thing I need to do is create this from a background to a layer. So if I double click it and go OK, it's now a layer, and you can see it's not locked there. And then I'm going to go filter, convert for smart filters, and this will mean that the filters are applied, but we can go back and edit them at any time, so it's non-destructive. So there we've got, and you can see this icon here that shows it's a smart filter. Now, although we're going for black and white, the first thing I want to do is, this guy is a vicar. He's, you know, obviously got a few years under his belt, and we want to bring out the real characterfulness of his face. So you wouldn't do this with a female portrait, but with guys, we want to bring out the character, the lines, the wrinkles, the lived-in face. So we're going to go filter, Nik Effects, and before we go into silver effects, we're actually going to go into color effects, because there's a couple of useful filters in there that will help us with this image. So what Photoshop is now going to do is render this in color effects. Here we go, and the first filter I want to apply is detailed extractor. So this brings out the maximum detail. So if I just turn this off, you can see how we haven't got the effect on his face as much. These are the standard settings, the default settings. If I tick that on again, you can see we've increased the contrast. It's brought out the lines and wrinkles in his face and whatever. The other thing it's done though is enhance the detail on the background, and I don't particularly want that because the background is blurred. So what we're going to do is add some control points. We just open this box here, and we're going to set them at 0 opacity, so that's black effectively, which then blocks the effect of the filter. So if I click on that and we put a filter on here, you can see how the softness has come back in here. And if this slider affects how far that goes, and this affects how much, how much or a little it affects. So if we go to 100%, we're back to where we was. So we're putting it back to 0%. So we're going to duplicate that control point by clicking here. We've got another one, and we're going to move that one down here somewhere. We've turned them off. Let's turn that one on and turn that one on, and you can see it blurring out the background. Let's duplicate it again, and what I'm going to do is bring this one over here, and you can see it immediately, but we want to just reduce the size of that so it's not affecting the Vicar. I will duplicate it again down there. So there we are. So we've got him nicely popping out of the page there, but we've kept the softness in the background. Now the other filter I'm going to add is one called Darken, Lighten, Center. So this will darken parts of the image and lighten other parts. So what we want to do is lighten the bit that we want the viewer to look at and darken the edge. So it's a bit like adding a vignette. So if we hit the place center icon here and we click here, you can see that's come. I want to just move that a little bit more this way so it's on that eye there. There we go. Now let's just bring it back a bit. And we can change the shape of it from either square to sort of more round, and I'm going to bring it more round there. And let's just reduce the center size a bit. You can see that coming in, so the background's dark. So okay, so that's what we've done in color effects, and I like that. Let me just go back to detail extractor again and just see if we can just push that a fraction further. Yeah, a little bit more detail there. So now we click OK, and that will take us back to Photoshop. So you can see what we've got here is we've got this color effects. It's added it as with a mask and the smart filter underneath. So if we just go back to the before and the after, there you can see we've got a lot more light on his face. We've got a lot more detail in there. So now we're going to convert it to black and white. So we'll go back to Filter, Nik Collection, Silver Effects, and this will open it in Silver Effects for us. So we're taking what we've already done and we're now adding to it. Is the default neutral preset in Silver Effects, and we've got a number of effects here. So that's underexposed, far too dark, high contrast, and you can work your way through these, but I generally start with the neutral one. But I want to add a bit more contrast to that, so let's just bump the contrast up a bit. And you can see on each of these sliders, when you first go in, they're collapsed like that. But if you open each one up, you can see you've got some additional sliders underneath. So let's just amplify the blacks a bit there. So give it a bit more punch. Not a lot, there we go. Let's just bring the shadows up a bit. It's quite dark around the edge, but that's because we added that light on it with the color effects. There, I'm quite liking that. You've got various color filters you can use here, which would simulate putting a color filter over your lens as you might have done in the film days. So if we put a red filter, that brings out the face. If you put a yellow filter, less so. If you put a blue filter, it goes the other way. But in this case, I think we'll keep it exactly as it was. You've got a tone curve just like you'd have in Photoshop. Let's just add a little bit more contrast there. with the tone curve. There we go. And then you've got some film types that you can use, and these all simulate the sort of black and white films. So you've got Kodak Pro, you've got Ilford FP4, you've got HP4, which are some of the faster ones. The Ilford films tend to be very contrasty, and if you're going to use one of these, I prefer the Kodak ones, but actually I think for this image I'll leave it as neutral there. We've lost our levels and curves adjustment. Just put that back a touch there, and then you can go on to add grain to the film if you like. Again, open this up. You've got the size of the grain, which makes it more grainy or less grainy, and then you've got the hardness of the grain. So if I just put it so you can see that there, that's soft and that's hard. That's probably more difficult to see, but again, I don't think we want a particularly grainy image here, so let's filter that out. You can also split tone the image from here, and you can add a vignette. I prefer to add my vignettes in Photoshop if I'm going to add them. So I'm pretty happy with that as it is. So let's just click OK. So now we're going to go back to Photoshop, and there we have our image. So if we have our opening position, which was there, to where we are now, which is there. And to me, that's got real punch, drama, character, and it's got some nice space for him to look into. So there you have it. That's how I would use color effects and silver effects. By the way, please excuse the background behind me. You can see all the boxes. I'm supposed to be moving house in 4 days' time, but we haven't signed contracts yet, so that's all a bit stressful. But anyway, hope you found that useful. That's how I use Nik Effects. Bye for now.